However, things did start to look up for the CMS mission to New Zealand with the arrival of the Reverend Henry Williams, who in 1823 set up a new mission over here in Paihia.
The Reverend Henry Williams was a no-nonsense ex-naval captain, a former man of war, now committed to the gospel of peace. Maori knew Williams as Te Wiremu, or by his nickname Karuwha, 4 Eyes.
Williams became the leader of the Church Missionary Society in New Zealand. And he was based at the new mission station which he established at Paihia, which was down here on the strip of land between the sea and the hillside.
This is what the Paihia mission station looked like in 1827. And this is the scene at the Paihia mission station on the day in January 1826 when the mission launched its own ship, the 55-ton Herald. The painting was based on a sketch by Henry Williams' wife, Marion Williams. Williams dropped Marsden's approach of wanting to civilise Maori before converting them, and instead concentrated on directly communicating the Christian faith to Maori, especially through the use of the printed Maori Bible. As with most missionary wives, Marion Williams played a key role in the mission. In addition to caring for her family in a challenging context, she taught school, mentored many young Maori who lived with them, and frequently held the fort while her husband was away on mission trips elsewhere.
Williams was increasingly held by Maori in very high respect.
Henry Williams was a person respected by many of the tupuna of the day, and largely because I see him as a bridge builder, but also as a person to whom the Māori tupuna trusted.
After Williams' death, 7 major tribes from around the country banded together to build a memorial to him in the churchyard at Paihia, with the words, 44 years a preacher of the gospel of peace, a father of the tribes. Henry Williams' role among Ngāpuhi is also honoured in Te Tii Marae at Waitangi by a carving of him and his Bible, and even with his spectacles.
Williams, the man, with glasses and all, it's very unusual to see an image of a Pākehā in the carving in any meeting house.
Christian witness among Maori was strengthened in 1822 by the arrival of Wesleyan missionaries, who generally had good relationships with the CMS missionaries.
Their first mission station was at Kaio, near the Whangaroa harbour. In 1827, the mission at Kaio was abandoned after being attacked by Maori. But the next year, in 1828, the Wesleyans re-established themselves in New Zealand, at Manongu, in the Upper Hokianga.
Back in the Bay of Islands, some Maori nicknamed the mission station at Paihia as heaven and referred to the drunken debauched settlement of Kororaraka over the water, now known as Russell, as hell. Every year, thousands of sailors came ashore at Kororaraka, most of them not up to much good.
But in 1838, Catholic missionaries arrived, led by a bishop, Jean-Baptiste Pompallier, a Frenchman. They set up a mission right in Kororaraka. The Catholic mission at Kororaraka included the building now known as the Pompallier Mission, where there was a printing press producing literature in the Maori language. The Catholic missionary priests, having no wives and families to care for, were able to travel widely among Maori and to live among them.
The Catholics were regarded with great suspicion by the Protestant missionaries. The Protestants were referred to by the Catholics routinely as the heretics, and the Protestants, for their part, would refer to the Catholics by titles like the whores of Babylon. In the 1830s and 40s, there was a really big change. There began to be a widespread Maori response to the Christian faith. This was a really important turnaround, quite a dramatic development. This strong move towards Christianity began right here in the Bay of Islands and then gradually continued to the rest of the country. Large numbers of Maori became Christian and others adopted at least elements of Christian faith. Secular anthropologists are inclined to explain the Maori response as a case of cultural adaptation. However, Christians may be more inclined to relate it to the intrinsic appeal and power of the Christian message.
We should note, as part of the Maori response, the extremely strong attractiveness to Maori of literacy and the scriptures. Many Maori had become fascinated both with reading and writing, as well as with the content of the scriptures. Printed gospel portions were available from 1827 onwards, and the whole New Testament by 1837, and these were carried far and wide among Maori, by Maori, way ahead of the missionaries.
William Colenso established right here in Paihia a printing press for the Church Missionary Society, and from the beginning of 1835 it began to produce lots of Maori scriptures.
From the late 1820s, there's an extraordinary burst of interest in the Christian faith among Maori. Maori were reading, memorising words of scripture, debating what they meant. There's a growing fascination with the truths of the Christian faith.
Another very significant part of Christianity's appeal was the message of peace, a message that had become attractive to those very badly affected by intertribal warfare after the arrival of muskets. Around 20,000 Maori had been killed in the 1820s musket wars. Initially, to promote the message of peace, Williams and other missionaries would sometimes venture into the midst of battles and call for peace, sometimes successfully. Sometimes they would sail out with a war fleet, hoping to act as peacemakers.
In time, Maori really adopted the Christian message of peace for themselves. And the Christian teaching on loving and forgiving your enemy absolutely revolutionised intertribal relationships.
There's a very striking change evident among Maori people when the gospel begins to have an impact among them. There's a determination to act in ways that are not brutal or violent. There's a desire to seek peace. There's an abandonment of the principle of utu. There's a willingness to accept missionaries coming among them to bring peace. All these are remarkable changes from the behaviour of Maori back in the 1820s. This is the first and most striking evidence of the impact of Christianity.
While it was European missionaries who first brought the Christian gospel to Aotearoa, the stunning fact is that it was primarily Maori who then took the gospel to other Maori. Among the first to do so were former prisoners of war, slaves of Ngāpuhi, who up north had gone to mission schools, and there they had learnt to read the scriptures. And then when Ngāpuhi released them, they went back to their own tribes and took with them the scriptures and the Christian message.
One such informal Maori missionary was Perepi Taumata Kura, a Ngāti Porou man who'd been captive of the Ngāpuhi and who'd attended mission schools in the Bay of Islands. He returned to his own Ngāti Porou people in the Waiapu Valley near East Cape. On New Year's Day 1834, and in his own way, he preached the first Christian message on the East Coast. Through him, large numbers of Ngāti Porou people began reading the scriptures and incorporating Christian beliefs and worship into their lives. In Poverty Bay, 3,000 Maori were persuaded to convert to Christianity by a man called Potoko.
In South Taranaki, among Ngāti Ruanui, a very large impact for Christian faith was made by a man called Wiramunira, who'd formerly been a prisoner of Ngāpuhi in the Hokianga, where he'd been under Wesleyan influence. A good example of how the Christian faith spread ahead of the missionaries is this story of Henry Williams, who in 1833 arrived at a little village in the Piako Valley, a place where no missionary had ever been before, and he decided to hold a Christian service. And he was rather surprised when the congregation there, of about 200 Maori, already knew the words of the hymn and all the words of the congregational responses. And then there's the story of Taurare, the daughter of Ngākuku, a Ngāti Haua chief in the Waikato. Ngākuku had converted to the Christian faith.
His daughter, Taurare, a young girl, had learned to read the Gospel of Luke from missionary Charlotte Brown at the CMS mission station near Matamatapa.
In 1836, at the age of 10 or 12, Tarare was killed by a raiding party from Rotorua. She was killed near Wairiri Falls in the Kaimai Ranges. A group of 21 Māori from the Matamata Mission and one Pākehā missionary had camped at the foot of the ranges in preparation for going the next day over Tauranga. The old Māori trail went up the ridge to the right of the Wairiri Falls. The raiders from Rotorua from further up the valley saw the smoke of the cooking fire and they crept through the night to the campsite here, and then just before daybreak they attacked. Everybody else managed to escape up into the bush, but Tarare was killed. Tarare's distraught father was urged to take utu, to seek revenge for his daughter's death. But instead, at her burial later that day, he spoke movingly of the need for Christian forgiveness. There lies my child. She has been murdered. Do not seek payment for her. God will do that. Let this be the finishing of the war with Rotorua. Now let peace be made. Turn to him.
Among the booty taken by the raiders was Ngā Kuku's copy of the Gospel of Luke. A few years later, back in Rotorua, Tarare's killer, Oita, became a Christian. He made the courageous decision to go and meet Tarare's father, Ngā Kuku, and to ask his forgiveness for the murder of his child. Ngā Kuku and Oita were reconciled. There was an interesting sequel to this story. It took place further south, in the Kapiti area. A former slave of the Ngāpui, Matahau, but known up north as Ripahau, had been in mission schools in Paihi and Waimati and learnt to read and write there. Travelling through Rotorua, Matahau returned to his own Ngāti Raukawa people at Otaki on the Kapiti coast.
Matahau began teaching the scriptures and the Christian faith to Katu, the son of Te Raupraha, the great Ngāti Toa chief who had his stronghold on the island of Kapiti, and who from there went on expeditions to the South Island, conquering and killing a large number of Māori.
Matahau had with him only one book of scripture, but sent a message to Rotorua asking for more. After a while, what was left of Ngā Kuku's copy of the Gospel of Luke arrived from Rotorua, with Ngā Kuku's name still in it. Matahau gave it to Katu and to his cousin, Te Whiwhi. They both became Christian believers. Together, Katu and his cousin went on a passing ship up to meet with Henry Williams at Paihia and to urge him to send a resident missionary to the Kapiti area.
By the time missionary Octavius Hadfield arrived in 1839 to establish new mission stations at Waikanai and at Otaki, considerable numbers of Māori on the Kapiti area were already Christian believers, reading the Bible, keeping the Sabbath, gathering for worship. Katu and his cousin were both baptized, and Katu was given the new baptismal name of Tamihana. They were both recognized by the mission as Bible teachers. In 1842, Tamihana and his cousin also became missionaries to the South Island, preaching the gospel and the message of peace to their former enemies, the Ngāi Tahu, the same people that Tamihana's own father had formerly terrorized. Tamihana, on his missionary journeys, went as far south as Stewart Island. This is a photo of Tamihana much later in life.
Through this man, the connections with Ngā Kuku's Gospel of Luke now stretched from the Bay of Islands to the very bottom of New Zealand.
There were other Māori as well who took the gospel to former enemies. For instance, Manahira Te Potama and Kiriopa, men among the Ngāti Ruanui in the Hawera area, took the Christian message up to their enemies, Ngāti Tuwharetoa in the Taupo area. At Tukanu, they were martyred.
Ngāti Tuwharetoa then agreed to make peace and to welcome a Bible teacher from Ngāti Ruanui.
In 1846, a European traveller to the South Island's west coast recorded his impression that all the Māori of that area appeared to hold to the Christian faith, even though he understood that no European missionary had ever been there. The common thread in all of this is that it was predominantly Māori who took the Christian message across the length and breadth of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
By the mid-1840s, in response to Māori requests, The CMS, Wesleyans and Catholics had each established an extensive network of mission stations around the North Island, and to a lesser extent in the South Island. The first mission station in the South Island was established by the Wesleyans at Waikoaiti. The mission stations helped consolidate Christianity among Māori, but the Pākehā missionaries freely acknowledged that Christianity would never have made such progress among Māori if it were not for Māori missionaries, leaders and Bible teachers. In the mid-1840s, it was estimated by a CMS-connected source, and perhaps overgenerously, that over 42,000 Māori were attending CMS church services, about 6,000 attending Wesleyan services, and about 5,000 Catholic services. The Māori population at that time was about 70,000.
In many places, including Waikanae, Otaki, Turanga and Poverty Bay, up near East Cape and at Matamata, Māori Christians constructed very large houses of worship, wharekarakia, places that were capable of accommodating up to 1,000 people.
This was the large church at Turanga, Poverty Bay. Notice the church building in this historic sketch of the Kenakena Pā and mission station at the mouth of the Waikanae River.
This was the large church building Rangiatea at Otaki, destroyed by fire in the mid-1990s. It was replaced by a replica.
Ko ahau te huarahi te pono me te ora. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
In the Waikato, there was the leading Ngāti Haua chief, Wiremu Tamihana, represented here by this teko in a meeting house, which shows him teaching from the Bible. In 1846, Tamihana founded a model Christian village near Matamata with a strong Christian code of behaviour, a large church, a boarding school, a flour mill, and hundreds of acres of crops which supplied the market in Auckland. He called his village Peria, Maori for the biblical name Borea, a place where people eagerly studied the scriptures.
Peter, if I were to ask you the question, in 1850, which group in New Zealand was more conspicuously Christian, Māori or Pākehā, which group would you identify?
Oh, well, without any hesitation, I'd say Māori, because, again and again, you see that Māori are the ones who are fascinated and focusing on their faith.
Professor James Bellich writes that by the 1840s, Māori engagement with Christianity was real, deep and broad, and that by the 1850s, over 60% of Māori counted themselves as Christian.
The mid-19th century Māori response to Christianity is a bit of an embarrassment to some, both to secular-minded Pākehā and to some contemporary Māori. They tend to downplay it, or perhaps to try and explain it away. Go into some museums and you'll find little or no acknowledgement that there was a time in New Zealand's history when vast numbers of Māori embraced the Christian faith enthusiastically for themselves. The widespread Māori reception of the Christian faith from the 1830s onwards is a part of New Zealand's national history which needs to be acknowledged and perhaps reclaimed.